free online events to offer insights into the careers of professionals from the arts and heritage sector. The young consultants researched and contacted industry professionals, inviting them along to give a short talk about their career, which will be followed by an in-conversation and a question and answer session. The members of the Young Consultants group have helped to devise the event, the marketing and the promotion of the events. The Young Consultants programme offers local residents aged between 16 and 25 the chance to gain some experience in the arts and heritage sector, as well as to help to shape the future programming at the Amelia. So what is the Amelia? Little picture there. The new cultural learning space in Tunbridge Wells will bring together what was formerly separate entities, the Museum and Art Gallery, Library, Tourist Information, Gateway Services and the Kent Adult Education Service. The new audience-centred building will bring alive unexpected stories about Tunbridge Wells and will hopefully challenge perceptions of the town with an ambitious and exciting programme of exhibitions and events. The integrated service at the Amelia will be housed in the former Library Museum Art Gallery building and the former Adult Education building, which is situated in the centre of Tunbridge Wells. The buildings are currently undergoing a major and really major renovation, including a beautiful extension, which can be seen in the picture, to link the buildings together. So it'll be completely amazing. Take this moment to thank our funders, National Lottery Heritage Fund, Arts Council England, Kent County Council and Tunbridge Wells Borough Council. Without them, none of this would be possible, so we thank them for their support. Last week was our first event, and that was Emily Steer from Elephant Art Magazine. Today we welcome Young Consultant member Saskia and our special guest Kim Drummond, and I'll now hand over to Saskia.
Thank you very much, Ed, for that introduction. And as said before, my name is Saskia and I am part of the Young Consultants programme here at the Amelia. And today, for the second Amelia Asks talk, I would like to introduce Kim Drummond, a classicist and my former teacher, who is going to be giving a very exciting talk today all about classics, followed by a question and answer. And any members of the audience who have any questions, feel free to write them down in the conversation bar and I will try to answer as many as possible. So without further ado, I will hand over to Kim.
Thank you, Saskia. I'm just in the process of uploading my little PowerPoint, which hopefully you'll be able to see shortly. As Saskia said, I am Saskia's former classics teacher, and I teach at an independent school in Hindhead. I've been teaching classics for about 8 years, but I've been studying classics for at least the last 20. When Saskia asked me to talk today, I racked my brains at first to think about what to talk about, because classics is such a broad subject. But then I remembered something Saskia said to me a while back, which was when she was talking about studying classics and going on to do a degree in classics, that people didn't always really understand what she meant. So I thought, well, that's perhaps the best place to start, to talk about what classics is and why you should study it. I've been asked all sorts of things over the years. Somebody thought I studied classical music, or I taught classical music. Someone else thought I taught classical literature. So it is one of those subjects that does get slightly confused, and I hope that I'll be able to help with that today. So what is it? Well, if you went onto the internet, this is what you would find, something along the lines of the study of the literature, history, philosophy, languages and archaeology of the ancient Greek and Roman worlds. And that bit's important because it is specifically to do with the ancient Greek and Roman worlds. Of course, you bring in other organisations, other countries, because of the way the Greeks and the Romans traded and interacted with them. But essentially, if someone's studying classics, they're studying the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans. And really, they can tailor their study to what interests them. So it might be literature. It could be the ancient Greek poems by Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey, which a lot of us will have heard of, or the Aeneid by Virgil, the Roman writer. But equally, it could be Roman plays, it could be political treaties, it could be diaries and letters, it can be any sort of literature. It could be the history, just how we get from ancient Greece to ancient Rome and the passage of time and how that evolves. It could be the philosophy, so you could go back to Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and immerse yourself in 5th century BC Athens. It could be the languages, Latin and ancient Greek, but it's really worth saying here that you do not have to study Latin and or ancient Greek to do classics. It is perfectly possible to follow a route through GCSE, A-level and to degree level where you do not study either. So don't let that put you off if that's something that you're concerned about. And lastly, the archaeology, the wonderful sites that we see as we go around, the Colosseum, the Pantheon, the Parthenon, all of those things, sculptures, aqueducts, all of those things that fall under archaeology. So that's the what. What about the why? Well, again, if you go on the internet, this is the sort of thing you'll find. Classics graduates have a reputation for being intelligent, analytical, and articulate. They are also widely employable and well regarded by potential employers for their broad skill set, knowledge, and logic. All those things are true. They are absolutely true. You do have to be analytical. You do have to be able to articulate, because you have to remember the stories that you learn and apply them. You do use a broad sense of logic, and the main thing you use, though, is empathy. I'm going to come back to empathy shortly. You can go on to varied careers. I'm going to show a few on the next slide, but just to show you a few famous ones. We've got writers of fiction, so J.R.R. Tolkien, Virginia Woolf, and J.K. Rowling all have classics degrees. And then you have your figures in the arts and entertainment. So Chris Martin, he's the lead singer of Coldplay, the actor Tim Hiddleston, and of course the wonderful Stephen Fry, who is a real ambassador for the classics and study of, and his books are superb. They, of course, are famous classicists. These are the kind of things that normal classicists, in inverted commas, do, because again, you tend to be asked, well, you know, what's the point? Am I just going to become a teacher or work in a museum? And it's misleading, because no, that's absolutely not. There are many other jobs. People in the paralegal profession and law and politics quite often have classics degrees. Journalism and the media is another one. Research and academia, all of this. In research and academia, I'm not talking about teaching here, I'm talking about going on to do PhDs, that sort of thing. Then there's events management, marketing and PR, and things like fundraising, campaign managers. All of these have classics backgrounds. Now, I mentioned a little word earlier, empathy, and this is a word that's so important. All of these professions need a degree of empathy, and that is incredibly important. And that's why I'm now going to talk to you about why you should really study classics. So empathy, yes, the ability to view ancient civilizations in context. Is it abhorrent to us that gladiators would go into the Colosseum and they would kill with gay abandon, really, each other, animals, the poor, slaves, Christians? No, of course it isn't. It isn't right in the context of our time, but you have to study it in the context of their time. And that's where empathy comes in, the ability to look at what's going on and understand it within the context. And in some of the jobs I talked about earlier, certainly in politics and journalism, those things are really, really important. Another reason, and this links to the image I've got on here, is travel. The study of classics opens up the world, really. For me personally, specifically Europe. My husband and I have travelled to France and Italy many, many times. I've been to Spain. All of these places are littered with examples of where the Romans and the Greeks have been. And quite often we will go on a trip to France, and we will look on a local map, or I'll take my guidebook, and we'll discover that there's something near us that we've never heard of, and we'll get in the car and off we go to explore it. And through doing that, we have found the most wonderful things. You're looking here at an image of Pont de Garde, which is an aqueduct in southern France near Arles and Nîmes. built by the Romans to get water from A to B. It is a feat of engineering, and it's just a beautiful thing to behold. There's a wonderful museum there. But what's interesting, as you drive up to it, you're thinking, well, this huge aqueduct is going to loom over the horizon at any minute, and it doesn't. You have to drive through sort of the woods to get to it, because of course they built them all on a level so the water could travel. Equally, we found ourselves in the hills in southern France, searching for a site called Glanum, which is an ancient Roman civilization site that was left and has been there since the 1st century BC. And again, it's absolutely beautiful. So I would say empathy and travel are two of the most important things and why you should study classics. If you feel you can be empathetic, if you feel you want to learn to be empathetic, and if you want the thrill of travel, for travel to take you to places you wouldn't ordinarily go, then certainly it's a subject to think about. The other big thing is imagination, because it is littered, the study of classics, with stories. Stephen Fry's book, Mythos, is full of the stories of the myths, and they really are, without exception, fantastic, wonderful stories. I've just picked one of my favourites here. You're looking at an image on the screen of Zeus and Athena. So you've got a sculpture on the left-hand side, and you've got an image from a black on red pot, Athenian pot, on the right-hand side. And this story is all linked to the birth of Athena, Athena, the goddess of wisdom and battle strategy. And so the story goes, Zeus, her father, was married, he's king of the gods, married to Hera, queen of the gods. But Zeus was a philanderer. He loved other women, and he was a very naughty boy, and his wife was very upset with him on many, many occasions. And this was one of them. He took a shine to a goddess called Metis, who in some stories he'd been previously married to. But he took a shine to Metis and he slept with her. Hera got to hear of this, and she comes thundering down from Mount Olympus, but somebody tips Zeus off and tells him that Hera knows about this liaison. So Zeus, in a panic, thinks, what can I do? And he does, of course, what any man would do. He turns Metis into a fly and swallows her. So then we have the situation where Metis is buzzing around inside Zeus's body, and she's also pregnant, just to make it slightly more complicated. So the pregnant fly is zooming around in Zeus's body. The fly eventually settles in his head, and as a result of this, Zeus gets awful headaches. He keeps getting these terrible headaches. So he goes to the god Hephaestus, who you can see in the top right-hand image. And he's the god of metalworking and forgery. And he says to Hephaestus, I've got this dreadful headache. Can you hit me on the head with your axe, please? So Hephaestus, being a dutiful god and not wishing to upset the king of the gods, does what is asked of him. And he whacks Zeus on the head with his axe. And out of Zeus's head pops Athena. She comes out fully formed with armor on. So she has her shield, her spear, her crest on her head, her helmet, fully armored. Now, that is just one of the stories that the ancient Greeks would have loved, and just how they came to understand the world in some ways. We know they're not true. Myths aren't true, but that doesn't make them any less interesting. And stories like that are what makes classics. They are the foundation of the study of classics. And I think, for me, that the stories have always been about having the imagination. Good classicists have a good imagination. They have excellent imaginations. If you're one of these people that can go to the Colosseum in Rome and you can, in your head, imagine the sound of the crowd and the gladiators' shields clashing, then your chances are you'll be a good classicist. So we've got the stories. Why should you study classics? Because of the stories, because of the myths. And I've only touched on that one. I mean, there are lots more. The other thing I'd like to hopefully interest you in is the punishments of the gods, because they could be severe. So I'm going to talk to you about 3 poor, unfortunate, mortal kings of Greece. So these were all men that existed. They were mortals, so they lived and died as we do. And over time, each of them upset the gods. And when they died, they were punished for this. So what you're looking at on the screen now is Sisyphus. Sisyphus, well, really, Sisyphus doesn't have one story. Sisyphus has several, so I'm not going to go through them all, but it really essentially what Sisyphus did was upset the gods throughout his whole lifetime, because he kept cheating them essentially. So in the end, after he died, because Zeus is very patient, I mean, he lives forever. The life of a mortal is nothing to him. It's a very short span. So he waits for Sisyphus to die. And for his punishment, he decides that Sisyphus will forevermore, he's still there now, push a rock up a hill. And this big heavy rock will take him all day. He'll start at dawn and he'll finish just before dawn the following day. And when he gets to the top, he will rest. And as he rests, the rock will come loose again and will roll all the way to the bottom. So he'll have to trek back down and start all over again. And that was his punishment. That's what was set him into eternity. Now, what about this poor old soul? Well, you're looking here at Tantalus, the old man Tantalus. He was another king of Greece. And this poor chap, he got invited up to Mount Olympus to dine with the gods, which was a huge honor. But he was a bit skeptical, because he'd heard that the gods dined on ambrosia and drank nectar, and this was their food. And he thought to himself, I wonder if that's true. I wonder if they could tell if I put something else in their food. So he decided to test them. So what did he pick? I'll tell you what he picked. He picked his own son. He had his son killed, his son Pelops, and he had him cut up into lots of tiny pieces, which he then secreted into the food of the gods. Well, the gods, the second they tasted it, knew immediately that this wasn't their normal food. And they vowed to punish Tantalus, that he was immediately returned to earth, his kingdom was condemned. And when he again eventually died, his punishment was waiting for him. And this time Zeus came up with something even better. He got this old man, this king, to stand in a pool of water. And over time, of course, he would be thirsty. So he'd bend down to drink from the pool of water. But as he bent down, the water would lower, so he couldn't quite reach it. Equally, he'd get hungry, and Zeus had planted beautiful fruit trees above this pool. But as Tantalus reached up for a piece of the fruit moved out of his way. It was just too far for him to reach. So poor Tantalus is there now in eternity, stood in a pool of water, unable to drink and unable to eat. So the last one, save the best till last, is Ixion, poor old Ixion. Now, he was another Greek king that got invited up to Mount Olympus to dine with the gods. But this time he upset Zeus in a different way, because while they were sitting eating, Ixion took a shine to Hera, Zeus's wife. He thought she was quite lovely, and he decided he would quite like to seduce her. Now, Zeus got wind of this and thought, no, this can't possibly be. This mere mortal wouldn't insult me by being up here and trying to make a play for my wife. So he decided to test him. So he built a cloud, which he had look exactly like Hera. So Ixion thinks he's talking to Hera, not a cloud. And he sleeps with the cloud. So Zeus immediately realizes that this man is a betrayer, that he would have quite willingly slept with his wife, Hera. So he again is banished from Mount Olympus, and he is sent back to earth. And when he dies, his punishment is he's tied to a ever spinning wheel. Originally, the stories had this ever spinning wheel going round and round the sky forevermore, but at some point the wheel was collected and it was taken down to Tartarus, which is the worst possible pit of the underworld. And there, poor old Ixion spins to this day. So again, what I'm trying to get across to you is the study of classics is so much more than what people might think it is. You learn these wonderful stories and you apply them. And if you study it in depth, you don't just take these stories at face value. What you do is say, well, why were they important? Why would the Greeks have understood this story to be this? What does it teach us about the Greeks? Something else I want to talk, we're going to move to Rome now, is the politics. This is my particular love. I've always loved the politics of ancient Rome. It really is quite magnificent. You're looking at there a sculpture of the Roman politician, a man called Sulla, who was evil incarnate. And just to demonstrate how evil, Sulla, when he came finally into power after years of trying to get there, decided that he was going to deal with all those people. Now, of course, we're in history now, we're in politics, so we've moved away from stories, we've moved away now, we've moved into factual information that we've got written evidence for. And Sulla decided that he was going to get rid of all the people who had hindered his journey on his way. So he came up with the idea of something called the prescriptions, and you get a little image of a chap there at the top. He's looking at something pinned onto a post, and that's literally what it was. Sulla and his friends gathered round, and every day they produced a list of people who had wronged them. And that list was posted up in the Forum, the main meeting place in Rome. And if your name was on it, I'm afraid you were doomed, because what it meant was that you could be killed. And if you were killed and your head was chopped off and delivered to Sulla, the person who did that was paid a huge amount of money. So it was a dreadful time to be alive. You didn't know if you were going to be on the prescriptions list. So you literally had to go down in the morning and see if your name was on it and whether you were going to live or die. So we've had the stories, we've had the politics. The very last thing I want to talk to you about is there was a lot of murder. Now, again, personally for me, I do love a bit of murder. So here you've got an image of Commodus. Now, that's the actor that played Commodus in Gladiator. Now, in the movie, for those of you who saw it, he was killed in the ring. Now, it wasn't too far from the truth. He was a gladiator. He did fight as a gladiator. He did fight in the ring, and he was meant to be very good at it. But that's not how he died. How he actually died, well, there's two different stories. One was that he was murdered in his bath. So he was taking a bath one day. People decided he'd become far too powerful, and they murdered him in his bath. The second one was that he was killed by Narcissus. Narcissus was actually his lover. He was a fellow gladiator, and they had been lovers for a long time. But Commodus had got more and more cruel. And in the end, they persuaded Narcissus to just strangle him, which he did. So that was poor old Commodus. Claudius, the Emperor Claudius, you may have heard of him. Well, by comparison to Commodus, he got off quite lightly. He was poisoned by his wife, Agrippina, with mushrooms. And lastly, there's Caracalla. You can just tell looking at him that he's a grumpy looking emperor, and he really was hated. He had his own brother killed. And if you go to the Roman Forum in Rome, there is the Arch of Septimius Severus. Septimius Severus was Caracalla's father and the emperor before him. And when he died, he made both Caracalla and Gaeta, Caracalla's brother, joint emperors. And Caracalla had actually stabbed and killed Gaeta, and then he erased his name from monuments. So if you go to Rome, if you go in the Forum, if you go to the Arch of Septimius Severus, you can actually see where the name Gaeta has been rubbed out if you know to look. And Caracalla, well, he was murdered very unceremoniously while taking a wee. So I think that pretty much sums up the subject that I love. I hope it's inspired you a little bit. And I will hand back to Saskia in case she's got any questions for me.
Well, thank you very much. That was really interesting. I think my first kind of question would be, why do you think that classics can get confused? Because do you think that some people perceive classics not as academic as other subjects because of the quite far-fetched myths? Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I think it is. I think you do have to be careful. I mean, I touched on some of these, fanciful stories, and I think people do get a little bit stuck. I did have somebody slightly insultingly say to me once, it's just a mixture of religion and storytelling, which I thought was a little bit dismissive of 20 years of my life. But it's so much more than that, because, as I say, it isn't just about the stories, the politics. Democracy comes from ancient Greece. It's how democracy started is from there. We learn so much, and it's no coincidence that the Romans had a Senate and the Americans have a Senate House. It's no coincidence that the Rome has a Capitoline Hill, and in Washington DC the Senate meets on the Capitol Hill. You know, so these things are all relevant. But yes, it can get a little bit lost, and I think partly that's due to a lot of children being taught classics very young and not progressing and understanding that it gets there's many more layers to it. I think it would be fair to say.
Yeah, because I know that not like a huge amount of schools do classics, but what advice would you give someone, like if they wanted to get into it, but if their school doesn't do it, like what advice would you give for like a starting point for someone who wants to get into it?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to understand that you don't have to have done GCSE classics to do A-level classics. So when I taught A-level, I taught it at Chichester College, at the FE college there, and it was a brand new subject, and nearly all of the children I taught, I would say 99%, had come from state school backgrounds where they were not taught classics, and it really doesn't matter. That should never preclude you from studying it at A-level. I mean, you can certainly, if you've had an interest in the stories growing up, if you've read, that can help. But I had two Latvians who came over and were studying in Britain from Latvia, and who came to the open evening and never heard of it and just thought it sounded wonderful. And they both went on to get really good grades in their A-levels. And I think of quite a few of my class, at least 5 or 6 went on to do degrees in classics. So yeah, don't worry if you haven't done it at GCSE would be my message.
No, and would you say that classics, I know you touched on it in the beginning, but would you say that it is a good degree to have for the future?
Absolutely. I mean, I can't emphasize the word empathy enough. I went on about it, but I can't emphasize it enough. It does teach you empathy. I think it makes you a rounder person. I think it makes you able to stand back from discussions and perhaps things you see on the surface and be able to look at them more objectively than perhaps you might if you did something else. Equally, from a purely data driven statistic, if you look at the entry criteria for somewhere like Cambridge University, they break down subjects into blocks. So there's block A, block B, block C, and you've got in block A the subjects they view as most important, things like English literature, language, history, and classics. It's there, it's in their block A. So you know, it's given a lot of kudos when you go to university, certainly.
What would you say is, because I know that you love the politics side of it, but what does anything else like really excite you about the subject?
Yeah, politics has always been my first love. I mean, I absolutely love the cut and thrust, which is interesting because I'm not particularly a modern politician, as it were. I mean, I do follow what's going on, but it doesn't. I mean, I just love but I also love. I quite enjoy a battle, I think, if I'm honest. You know, I love teaching the Battle of Actium, where you get Egypt involved and Cleopatra comes in. I mean, the death of Julius Caesar is absolutely wonderful, because for me personally, if someone was to say to me, you know, when did the passage of what was going to happen in Rome change? Well, it was the day Julius Caesar was assassinated, because suddenly that saw the beginning of the end of the Republic and the movement into the emperors. So yeah, I'd say a good battle. In Greece, the Battle of Thermopylae is absolutely wonderful. And you know, there's movies that you can watch, and yeah, so a good battle, I think, Saskia, would be my second favourite thing.
Yeah. Because I know that you were in the Navy before you were a teacher. So when you were in the Navy, were you always thinking, like, I don't want to do this forever? How did you get into teaching and then teaching classics?
Well, it's a bit of a strange way around this. I was in the Navy. I served for 23 years, so it was a full-on career for me, and I hadn't really thought about it. But when I came out of the Navy, or actually before I came out, I started my degree with the Open University, and I didn't really know what to study. I had no idea what subject to do. And then I remembered when I was at school, I did drama GCSE, or O-level as it was then, and I'd done a project on the god Dionysus. And I remember being absolutely bowled over by this and thinking it was the most fascinating thing I'd ever read, and just been and doing research. In those days, of course, went to a library, you had to sit in the library with books, but sitting there, getting all this information about this God and who he was, and the God of wine and good times and all this sort of thing. And I just remembered that interest. And the Open University do a really well, highly regarded classics degree and master's degree in classics. And I think it just was that, remembering that changed my whole life, really. And I never intended to go into teaching. I sort of fell into it, really, but it's the best thing I ever did.
Do you think if you could go down a different career path, would you, or just classics is definitely what you want to do? Oh
yeah, I'm really happy. I mean, I wouldn't. I'm glad I didn't go into it at the beginning. I'm glad I didn't become a teacher straight away. I'm glad I've had this. I'm enjoying this being my second career. But I wouldn't change it for the world. I mean, I feel incredibly lucky that something I have a passion for and is essentially a hobby is also something I do for a day job. And people warn me against that. So they said, "Oh, you might not want to. If you love it so much, perhaps if you start teaching it for a job, you'll start to go off it." But that's never ever happened.
That's good. And because I know that you're doing a children's book on Athena, like, why a children's book? Like, why not for, I don't know, like a older age group?
I think really because I had the story in my head, that came to me in my head about this idea of a young girl traveling with Athena and going on adventures with her. And it just seemed to me to lend itself more to an adventure story aimed at, I suppose, year 7, year 8 children, maybe year 9 children, rather than an adult book. And I just think, again, I've talked about imagination. I do have a very vivid imagination. I do think it's important as a classicist, and my imagination and the love I have of telling stories to excite people about my subject lends itself, I think, to a storybook for younger children. And it's been a while since Percy Jackson, hasn't it? Not that I in any way think mine is going to be that good, but it's been a while.
Yeah. Well, have you faced any challenges along the way? Like, when you were at the Open University, was there ever a time when you thought, oh, maybe not?
I think sometimes people can view, because my degree is with the Open University, it's not, I don't have a red brick university degree. I did worry that might be a challenge, that I came back to it late. But actually, my old boss, the principal of Chichester College, said to me, I mentioned this to her, and she said to me, actually, when I was sifting through looking at people's CVs, what stood out to me was that you had an OU degree, because what that showed me was that you were prepared to spend years, coming home from work, sitting in a room somewhere, working away on my tutor marked assignments and she said, and that showed a real dedication. So she said, for her, it put me near the top of the pile rather than the bottom. And that was really, really lovely to hear. But I have met a degree of snobbery. I have had people say, oh, where's your degree from? As if I meant to come out with some wonderful, and when I say the OU, they don't quite know what to do. But no, generally, I think it's been a really positive thing, and I would recommend it to anyone. I would say, even if it's not something you're thinking of pursuing now, don't give up. You can come back to it. I was 40 before, I got my degree. You can come back to it. It's one of those subjects. It doesn't mean that you have to kiss it goodbye and never worry about it again.
Yeah. How long were you at Chichester College for before you moved to St Ed's?
I started at Chichester College in 2006, and I left. I've been at St Ed's I'm just starting my 6th year, so I was there about 8 years, I think, altogether. And it was a super experience. I loved it, but I just wanted to change. I think one of the things the Navy does is it makes you a little bit restless. Every few years you want to move on and do something else, so I got a bit restless and decided I needed to move. But I think the move I've made to St Ed's was absolutely the right one, because it's a quirky, lovely place to work.
Yeah. What like skills would you say you've got from the Navy that you kind of transferred onto like teaching? What have you learned from that?
I think the ability to talk to people at all levels. In the Navy, you mix with people from all different levels. You're talking to your colleagues, but you're also talking to admirals, you're talking to commodores, you're talking to people that are a bit you know, initially on the face of it could look quite scary, but you learn to do that, to be able to converse with people on every level. You learn organisational skills without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah.
You know, you have to be where you've got to be at the time you've got to be, and no excuses. So I think the organisational, and that certainly helps when you're putting together PowerPoints and handouts and getting all those things sorted. It really helps to have those organisational skills, and also probably a good sense of humour. I think most people in the Navy have a very good sense of humour.
Why, because I know you've spoken a lot about empathy, but like, why is empathy so important, especially when doing something like classics?
Yeah, I mean, empathy is my word, I think, because it's easy to judge, you know. I've had a lot of people say to me, but you know, the Romans were dreadful, or that they did this, they slaughtered these. But actually, if you do your reading, and if you look into what the Romans did and didn't do, one of the wonderful things that they did was, yes, they would go to other countries, they would conquer them, they would take them over, but they didn't sort of ride roughshod over them. So taking, for example, when they went into Africa, so when they eventually conquered and went into Africa, the Africans lived subterraneously. So they had their houses underground because it's so hot. So they had built houses underground where it was cool. Now, the Romans could quite legitimately have gone over and said, well, we're not doing that anymore. We're Roman, we're building up. They did build up, but they also left the underground houses for the Africans to live in. And I think that's incredibly important, that they, you know, they didn't go in there, slaughter everybody, and insist that people followed what they did. The same with religion. When they came to Britain, they were pagan. Britons had their own religion, and when you look around Britain and you go to Roman sites, there are still sites that you can see where the Romans and the British, you know, had religious temples next to each other. So yeah, I think it's sometimes people can get a bad impression of the Romans, but it's not necessarily true.
What would you say, like, do you prefer studying the Greeks or the Romans? Because they are different, like very different, but then also quite similar.
Yeah, and you know, I can honestly say that over the years I've flip-flopped backwards and forwards. I used to love the Greeks. When I started, it was all about the Greeks.
Yeah.
And then I moved more to the Romans. And now, I suppose now I'm slightly more back on the Greeks. Just because I'm loving learning again about the Parthenon and the battles, and yeah, so yeah, you go backwards and forwards. I think, I don't know, yeah, I change year by year.
Yeah, because I'd say for me, I love the kind of more the cultural side of it, like the religion and all the festivals and the myths and stuff. Like,
Yeah.
I really like that side of it.
Yeah, and they are wonderful, and again, you've just touched on, you know, another side of it, which I didn't mention. You know, there, and I think any student of classics, and you know, Saskia, so well, is there are so many bits to it. And I think the great thing about the new GCSE, the OCR GCSE, is it's a really thorough GCSE. It covers so much, and because of that, I really feel that a student leaving classics GCSE has got so much knowledge before they go into A level. But again, I must say, you don't have to have that knowledge to start A level. So it's going to take, but it is a wonderful GCSE. And yeah, there are so many bits. And when you go on to degrees, of course, you can look. I mean, I can't remember which university it is. One of the universities that one of my students went to, a girl called Katie, she ended up doing a degree where she did a gap year in Rome, and she went to live in Rome for a year. While she studied, and I mean, if you look around, there are so many opportunities out there for different things.
Yeah, because one uni, so I'm going to apply to the Uni of Birmingham, and in the second year you go to Italy for 2 weeks, which I think is really, really cool.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. I was lucky enough to go on a teacher course recently, well, a couple of years ago now, and I went to Athens in July, which I wouldn't recommend, but it was absolutely phenomenal. And we had an instructor who had a doctorate in underwater archaeology and classics, and she was just phenomenal. And yeah, I mean, like I said before, the world opens up.
Yeah, no, that would be so cool. Yeah, I think archaeology is something that I haven't really touched on. I mean, obviously, like, done temples and all that stuff before, but I'm not like archaeology, like I've never just done that before. So I think at uni that would probably be, because there are so many different modules, which is what I'm really looking forward to kind of going into and just going down different avenues that I haven't like even thought of.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, you know, there are so many different avenues. There are so many different asides that you can do. And even if you've got a very, you know, if literature is your thing, but you just fancy studying it in the ancient form, you can do that. If history is your thing, if religion's your thing, all of those are perfectly able to form a really good degree.
Yeah, I think since doing it at A level, because like you said, how the GCSE was really thorough, I think the transition between like from GCSE to A level wasn't like, compared to my other subjects, classics was the one that I didn't really struggle with transitioning, because OCR is so like in depth, and I'm still on OCR now for A level, and it's really good. I've definitely got more into the politics side of it. More like, because we've done so much on Augustus, like so much, so it's definitely just got more of a bearing of all of that.
Yeah, well, Augustus is just fantastic to study, because you've got this young 19-year-old who wasn't even in the country when Julius Caesar was assassinated, had no idea he'd been made his heir. At 19, he arrives back in Italy, and suddenly he's the boss. And, you know, how do you go from a 19-year-old with a lot of people resentful of your age? Mark Antony had been Augustus's general, as you know, for years. He was expecting to be named. And then we end up with, you know, the two of them in conflict, and then watching Augustus, or Octavian, who became Augustus, bringing the Pax Romana, where you get this peace in Rome for so many years. I mean, it really is a lesson. As I can think of several politicians at the moment who could do with reading a little bit about Augustus.
Yeah, no, I think I just find it really just interesting to see the different things that Augustus did, like just through I've got really into coins, like coinage, just looking how he kind of presented himself so similar to Caesar, but just so tiny, like different.
Yeah, I mean, he was very clever, because if you read Suetonius describes Augustus as being quite ugly, and it's a really unflattering image, and yet when he presents himself on his coinage and in his in the statuary, he doesn't look like that at all. But interestingly, he was one of the first that did that. Sulla, who you saw on my slide, in the days of Sulla, and Marius was another one, their statues were very lifelike. I mean, Sulla suffered terribly from terrible skin, some form of awful acne. And if you look at his sculptures, you can see that in the sculpture. You can see the acne. Whereas you then move from those very realistic images to someone like Augustus, who portrays himself as young and youthful, even when he's in his 50s and 60s. That image of him is always young, and the Prima Porta statue being a perfect example. So
I love that statues.
Yeah, I love the Prima Porta.
Yeah, I definitely prefer looking at more like Hellenistic sculpture rather than like classical, which I think like the art of classics is definitely really a really nice part of it, because there's just so much and so like different styles, because you have like Hellenistic style, and then you have like the beautiful classical Prima Porta, like that, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, I'm with you. I like the Hellenistic ones more, I must admit,
because it's more real. It's more
absolutely, yeah, it is.
But I do really like I think the literature side of it as well is really,
I mean, there's so much, I think, there's so much literature.
Because I think having done because we did the Odyssey this year, and then I did the Iliad for my EPQ, and then I'm doing the Aeneid this year. So, and I think with literature, that's really a place, well, for me personally, like where my imagination can really kind of explode.
Yes.
Such, because the similes and everything, it's just like crazy and stuff.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is phenomenal, isn't it? And just have you got to? I don't know how far you're through the Aeneid yet, but you know, with the ghosts, have you got to the ghosts
we haven't started. The Aeneid's for year 13, but I've done the Odyssey. The Odyssey was year 12, which was I really enjoyed it, actually. I think out of the three, we did a bit of the Aeneid at GCSE, but I think I prefer the Odyssey to the Iliad, I have to say.
Well, the Odyssey is just such an amazing story. There's this chap who, you know, just wants to get home, but yeah, and all the things that happen to him on the way. And interesting, again, things like Scylla and Charybdis. I mean, Royal Navy ships used to be named after quite a lot of mythological beings. There was an HMS Scylla, there was an HMS Charybdis, for instance. But they are places that exist in the waters. There is a place that's even now you have to sail around because it's quite a big whirlpool, and Royal Navy ships have to go around it. So little things like that, which again, once you start doing research, you think, wow, that's amazing. Who would have thought that, you know?
Yeah, and I think reading around the subject is probably a really good kind of starting point for people, because I read Circe by Madeline Miller.
Oh, that's a wonderful book. Yes.
Yeah, and I'm using that for my English NEA, and because obviously I didn't really know a lot about Scylla, and like just hearing about her backstory, I was like, whoa, didn't know that.
Yeah.
I think reading around the subject is a very good starting point.
Yeah, there's a book as well called, I think it's called Argos, which Argos, which tells the story of the Odyssey from the perspective of Odysseus's dog. Oh. So Odysseus's dog is left when he goes away, and it's the dog tells the story. I haven't read it; it's on my bookshelf. I keep meaning to, and I can't quite read myself. Do I want to read this? I know he dies in the end, which doesn't help.
Yeah, no. Sees Odysseus and then dies, which is
the saddest thing ever. Just the saddest part of the book. Waited 20 years and then lays eyes on him and just dies. Oh, awful.
Yeah.
No, there's some great literature out there. The Iliad's probably the hardest to wade through. I agree. The Odyssey is okay. The Aeneid I find quite easy to read, maybe because it's slightly more modern because it was written by Virgil. It's Roman, but certainly the Iliad. There are chapters of it which are, quite frankly, like wading through treacle. Yeah,
no, some of it's quite slow.
Definitely.
It is good, yeah. Because to be honest, I've read most of it, but I really kind of just touched on all like the Achilles bits.
Yes, yeah, they're probably the best bits, aren't they? I think the Achilles bits and and the whole sulking in the tents. I've always quite liked that.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting doing him for my APQ.
Yeah, so yeah, there's some great bits in it, but equally the description goes on a bit in places.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Kim, I wondered if you mentioned a little bit about art. If I was, because I really like art, if where's a good place for myself and others who are interested in art to get involved in the world of classics?
Goodness, do you mean like museums, or do you just mean generally?
Yeah, maybe there's somewhere to go that might sort of, I'm very object based. So if there's somewhere that I can go to sort of see lots of that,
okay. So if you're object based, there are some great museums. The Ashmolean in Oxford is very good. It's a small, but it's very good. But sadly, really, the best museums are in Rome. I mean, where you see the sculptures, you see the pictures. I think from an art perspective, one of the things that most excited me was the first time I saw the wall paintings, and to see those wall paintings in situ is incredible. So Pompeii is fantastic for that. But even better, there's a property not far from Pompeii called the House of Poppaea, who was allegedly a wife of Nero, but we're not sure. But she lived in a big mansion house at the time of the eruption, and but it was quite well preserved. And there, the wall paintings are spectacular. Equally, on the Palatine Hill in Rome, they've opened the House of Augustus and the House of Livia now. The wall paintings there and in there are phenomenal. But yeah, the Capitoline Museum for Sculpture certainly is incredible. The new museum in Athens, which hasn't been open very long, that I went to, that's been done really well. Oh, and of course you've got the British Museum. I mean, you've got the sculptures, the Parthenon sculptures in the British Museum, which is fantastic. I take the children there. So lots, I guess, lots. But yeah, in England, Ashmolean, British Museum, I would say.
Thank you. Oh, Lucinda is raising her hand as well, so if you want to ask a question, you can unmute. Yeah, I think. Lucinda, if you want to unmute. Or write in the sidebar if you like as well. I'm seeing a little hand. Are you seeing that?
Yeah, I was seeing the hand. I don't know.
I think it's just Lucinda waving at me. I know Lucinda. Hello, Lucinda.
Excellent.
It's lovely that you've joined us. I had the pleasure of teaching her son. Well, sons actually, but one of her sons has taken it to GCSE and gets his results on Thursday.
Ah, exciting.
Which I suppose puts me in a very difficult position now, doesn't it? Because I know what he got.
Oh, yeah, so you kind of got to keep a secret.
Yeah, oh, I will, don't worry.
You know already?
Sorry?
Oh, yeah, because you did the... Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we did the predicted, so I know. I mean, I'm really pleased with the way that's gone, thankfully. The government have seen sense, which means...
Yeah, that was just crazy.
Yeah, well, I just feel like my children now will get the grades they deserve rather than the ones that the government think they'll deserve, so...
Absolutely.
That could only be good.
Hello.
Oh.
I think we've managed to unmute now.
Oh, yes, there we go.
Hello. It's Charles. I was very privileged to have Mrs. Drummond teach me for my GCSEs, but I just have two questions.
How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Lovely to hear you.
Yeah, we were just having some technical difficulties, but we're through. So, first of all, I was wondering if there were if there's a topic that you covered during your degree that we didn't cover in the GCSE syllabus that you would have wanted to teach our group in particular.
Oh, without a doubt, I always come back to the same one, Charles, which is the Second Punic War. I just think everybody should study the Second Punic War. It is because it's really where we can feel close to perhaps studying a whole different thing. I think if the Carthaginians had been successful, then we might have been all talking now about ancient Carthage as opposed to ancient Rome. Yeah, so I teach it now. I have actually brought it in, and I'm teaching it in year 8 at school because I just can't bear not teaching it. So I would say Second Punic War, and also I think the other one would be Cicero, because Cicero, Marcus Tullius Cicero, absolutely incredible character, lived all the way through the Republic. And when the Republic disintegrated, he was there. He was writing it down. He was writing personal letters. Which we have, so we don't get a sort of modified version, we get what he really thought. He was around. He tells the story of the death of Caesar. He was most upset that he wasn't there at the time, that he was kept away from the forum. But yeah, so I would say Second Punic War and Cicero would be my two.
Thank you very much. And then also, I'm sure you know that I have an avid interest in film and media and all of that sort of stuff. So I have maybe a bit of a different question, but I was wondering whether you have any favourite examples of where TV and film, they've had some influence from classical civilization, and not necessarily a direct adaptation of events that have occurred or certain stories, but where there's certainly been some subtle influences or anything.
I think the one that springs to mind, Charles, is "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?" Have you heard of that?
I can't say I have.
Yeah, it's a film with George Clooney in, and it's called "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?" And it's the story of George Clooney breaking out of prison. Or I think he's released, or he breaks out. I can't quite remember. It's a part comedy. It's George Clooney at his best because he does comedy fantastically, and about his journey home to his family. And it is based very loosely on the Odyssey, and it's done fantastic. There's a part in it where he's got 2 pals with him. And there's a part in it where they come across a group of women singing and beautifully while bathing in the river, which is taken directly from the sirens in the book, in the Odyssey. And there are these subtle little hints all over of that you can see if you know the Odyssey and you watch that movie. So I think that's probably one of the best examples out there.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Charles. Hope to see you soon.
You too.
Oh, it was nice to.
Yeah, it was lovely.
Saskia, did you see the other question in the bar, which I think was quite a good one?
I will see. No, it hasn't popped up.
So I've got it if you like. So Kim, have you seen the studies of classics change over time? And if so, do you have any sort of predictions, or do you think what's the direction you see it going in the future?
I have seen it change. I've seen it change purely because they've got it wrong. I think the biggest example, or the best example of that would be Pompeii, where the neighbouring town Herculaneum, for a long time they thought the residents of Herculaneum, which was much nearer the eruption, had been covered in mud and they died in a landslide. And then due to the wonderful Andrew Wallace Hadgell, who's been over there for years working on Herculaneum, they now understand much more about the pyroclastic surge, about the fact that their brains were literally boiled in their heads and they died a very instant death, tragic and awful as it is. So that's an example of it changing just really through a better understanding and better technology, I guess. Equally, there's a big question over Pompeii that keeps raging about dates. We've always believed it was the 24th of August 79 AD. That's been the date. But there's a slight problem in so much that when they examined the poo, because they found this ancient carbonized poo, and when they examined it closely, they found berries that aren't around in summer. They don't come out till autumn. So they started asking questions saying, oh, well, okay, perhaps the seasons have changed a bit. But more and more, they've been looking at this. They're now really starting to think that the eruption may have started, it may have been in October rather than August. But there's not quite enough yet. I think they're very close to making a big announcement, but not quite close enough. And I think to answer the question about, and thank you for the question, it's super, but I think to answer the question about where it will go, technology will lead us. I mean, recently, I keep talking about Pompeii, but it's where obviously so much has been done. They found this tragic, but I show it to the children and they can't help but laugh, even though it's awful, where they just dug up this poor old chap who it looks like he was just hit by a giant boulder, and you've got this massive boulder and then this little twiggy skeleton sticking out from it with no head. And the kids, of course, found this hilarious. But yeah, technology will. Horses is another one. They found that there aren't many horse skeletons in Pompeii they're discovering. So they're saying, well, why? We've got dogs, we've got people, why no horses? And this ties into the idea that they knew something was going on early and they were managing to get away. And how did they get away? They got on horseback. So yeah, technology will lead us in places that we have. And I just hope I stick around. And of course, the other thing is, will Naples still be here in 1,000 years? I doubt it very much. I think the next big eruption of Pompeii will probably wipe out that part of Italy. But who knows?
Yeah.
That's just my own prediction.
Yeah, so it's potential to go along and then something comes along technology-wise or research and it completely reshapes how everything you've learnt about.
Totally. And I think Herculaneum was the big one, because I grew up believing they were died in a landslide. And then suddenly you're thinking that's actually not completely wrong. So yeah.
Got to keep up then, got to have good stamina.
Yeah, and I think that's the trouble. I think people think, oh, well, classics, nothing changes. It's still 2,000 years ago. No, I mean, we are learning and learning all the time. There's still lots to learn, I think.
That's fascinating. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I think if anyone has any further questions, speak now. I think we're out of questions. So I'd like to thank Saskia, and we've got another one. Yeah, thank you.
Oh.
Yeah, go for it. Just in time.
Hello, it's Henry.
Oh, hello, Henry.
How are you?
I'm fine. How are you? Lovely to hear you.
Yeah, I'm very good, thank you. Recently, I've been reading about Thucydides' trap.
I don't know that one, Henry. Explain that one. Thucydides' trap. What's that one?
So it's the theory that when a rising power emerges, it threatens to displace the existing power.
Right, okay.
and therefore will eventually lead to conflict. And so I was wondering whether you believe that war between Athens and Sparta was inevitable.
Yes, I think it probably was, because I think it was all about city-states. You know, it was all in. I mean, these city-states in ancient Greece had sometimes their own language, their own army, their own currency. And I always explain it to when I'm teaching. It's like counties, like we have counties. They had city-states, but you imagine all the counties in Britain having their own language, their own currency, their own laws. You can imagine how that would create conflict, and each county would want to take over the next county, so they got bigger. And I think Sparta was starting to. It was very big. It had already started to expand, and was sort of rattling a lot of cages. And I think Athens saw the threat. And I think really in the Battle of Salamis, the Battle of, I'm trying to which one it was it Salamis? Or the Thermopylae, when the Spartans didn't really go and help the Athenians. I think that was the final nail in the coffin, really. So yes, I would say it was certainly inevitable.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Well, with that, another great question done. I think we might be out of questions now. So I was going to thank both Kim and Saskia for your time, and it was a great conversation. Hearing you chat was really, really nice. And thanks for sort of introducing those of us who are not so up to date with classics to the it feels like it's just the beginning of a journey.
It is. Yeah. Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. And to remind those who are on the call that so this was our second call in the series. Our third and final of this first set of talks is on the 27th with young consultant Charlotte in conversation with Matt White, who's an architect at Matt Architecture. So thanks for everyone for attending and your great questions. And Kim and Saskia, thanks again.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.